All right, today we are talking about some common missteps when we're talking about building an estate plan. It seems to be common knowledge that everybody needs an estate plan, but there are some things that we see on a regular basis that if only people knew, they could avoid a lot of inconvenience or worse in their future. So to kick us off, we have Jeremiah, California licensed attorney. He's going to be our resident expert on this topic, but as 3 certified financial planners, we have a lot of experience in talking with clients where maybe we've navigated some tricky waters when it comes to estate planning. So where should we get started?
Yeah, I think the first one is just the missteps can happen during life, but we got to fix them. Make sure they get fixed. A lot of these missteps, if someone passes away and one of these missteps we're going to talk about is in place, it gets locked in and then you've got to deal with it. And we have clients that come to us and say, hey, my parents have passed away. I need some help walking through how they had things set up. And often that's when we uncover some of these missteps that are really difficult to deal with. And so for any of our clients, people that we work with, we want to make sure this stuff's reviewed and discussed. And any of those changes are done now. Like, let's get this stuff done and tuned up so that in the future, we're saving a massive headache.
Yep.
I think the biggest thing is that
these...
I'm always surprised the number of people who don't have any kind of estate plan. You hear about it. It's so common. There's so much advertising on it. But again, what we do is we sit down with the clients and make sure that they've got something in place, because we all have a destiny for the end of life. And that creates a lot of problems if it's not taken care of.
Yeah. And
So,
I mean, let's be honest, it falls down the priority list. I don't care how old you are, or what season of life you're in. Thinking about your estate plan is not typically the top 5
right.
in your day, nor is it like the top 30. And so, even for us, this is something that on a routine basis, we go back to revisit with our clients. Oftentimes they've made an estate plan, but maybe they haven't really dusted it off the shelf and taken a look at it in 5 or more years.
Or
Right, so
more.
we're in the habit of just kind of revisiting it on occasion as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
not
let's jump
top of
in.
mind.
That's right. Let's jump into some of these missteps. I think the first one that we put together is I think this is when someone's in a different state, they have different estate planning rules in every state. And so it might have been different, or what they heard might have been different, or the guru they listened to on TikTok or Instagram also might be different. You want to look at the state that you're in. And the big one here in California, that's where we're at, that's where we have a lot of our clients, is the idea of a will. People do what sometimes they call it a love you will, or hey, I just got a will. I'm just going to give it to my kids. I wrote it myself. I found it online. I got this will. Well, what a lot of people don't realize in California specifically is that a will does not avoid probate. A will says who's going to get what, which is helpful and useful. But you still, if you have like real estate, you have rental properties, all that still has to go into probate. You have to go through the whole probate process. And in probate, they'll honor the will. They'll give it to the person that you want them to, but you have to go through that whole process. So a will in California, it's not ineffective. It's legal, it's binding, it's appropriate. But really in California, you want a trust. A trust is the main item. You still probably have a will, but we use what's called pour over wills, meaning it just pours everything over into your trust to make sure that your trust is the main document. And that's what's going to avoid probate. That's what's going to do all those wonderful things.
Having a will is like you've got your ticket to get into the amusement park, or let's use Disneyland, for example. But having a trust is like your fast pass. Like we have all waited in those lines at amusement parks when it's 100 plus degrees outside and you're thinking, how much longer? Is this ride really going to be worth it at the end? Right? Okay, so the will is you've got access to the park. You've given some guidance to people after your life, what you would like to have done with your assets. But the trust is your fast pass so that you can avoid probate.
I like Jeremiah's comments. He's told clients oftentimes, he said, if you like the DMV, you'll love probate.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody kind of gets that comparison quickly. It's like nobody wants to go down to the DMV. I mean, the last time I had to go to the DMV, I was able to go have an appointment, but there was at least 200 people inside that room. And I'm thinking, this is crazy, right? So why would you go through probate if you could avoid it?
A lot of people don't know that probate is a public process, so it's all discoverable information. And if privacy is important to you, having a trust in place will help keep that information confidential or among family or select members. That's important, as well as it can just be really expensive and lengthy. And, and you're basically passing on the onus of distributing your assets to the next generation or the people that you leave as your survivors.
That's right. All right, that's great. So the second one that we see a lot is someone's getting a little older and they say, well, my kids are going to get my assets anyways. I'm just going to put them on title to the house now. I'm just going to add their names. So that means they get it, right?
You should have music. Every time some bad event happens, life doesn't have the right music behind it. There should be dum 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 dum
Like a
dum.
soundtrack.
Yeah.
Right?
Have like some like Darth Vader dun dun the music coming in
Exactly.
as they say that. That's right. Yeah. So there's a few just the reason this is a misstep. There's a few that we'll just talk about. There's others I'm sure, but the initial ones is there's a massive tax change at death. So someone who owns a rental property, if they've held it for a number of years, they have a lot of built up capital gains, and when they pass away and that property is inherited by their kids, generally the way the laws work is a lot of those taxes go away. You get a step up in basis and it takes away those taxes. However, if you were to add your child or someone to the property during your life, you've now gifted them that interest. You've also gifted them your tax basis. So all those taxes that you accumulate in your life, now you pass away, your child steps into that because they were also entitled. Depending how you have it structured, they may keep all of those taxes. And if they ever sell it in the future, they may have a massive, unexpected, and unneeded tax bill. So
Mhm.
that's the first piece.
Yeah, to interpret, to make it more, again, I always look at, to give an example. So if you have a house that you bought for $50,000 40 years ago and is now worth $500,000, if you just gift that house to your child, when that child goes to sell that house, they're going to have to pay taxes on $450,000. Whereas if it was inherited, they would pay zero tax, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I love the illustration because I think then the numbers start to kind of click. This can be a significant tax bill. And I understand that there's reasons to think about transferring assets during life, but how we do them and what types of assets, right, should be discussed because there are different maneuvers that are more suitable during life, but specifically those that have a very low cost basis. So the same thing would apply if it's not a home in a stock. I bought Apple a long time ago before, and so you've got all those capital gains built up in that holding, right? And the same thing if you were to pass it on or inherit it, they would then get that step up in basis.
But if you were to, just gift it, we had a client recently that was received a gift of stock. And we had to have a conversation with it. Not only are they gifting you the stock, which is very nice, that family member. However, they're also gifting you their cost basis, what they paid for that stock. So they're gifting you all those taxes, which, they went into it with their eyes open. A gift is better than no gift. However, the value that came over into their account wasn't the actual value because all the taxes were embedded in there. So that's the first part. The second part about putting kids on title is you're now linking together kind of your finances and your credit and a few other items. So for example, you're living your life, things are going well, you're approaching retirement, you have some good rental properties, you put your children on title with you, thinking this is going to make it easier, and your child gets in a massive car accident and greatly harms somebody. They sue the insurance, the person who's injured sues the insurance, it blows past their insurance, and they start going after the child's assets. This is a tough situation. This is not something that someone wants to be in. However, because their name is on your houses, that court case now has access to start taking your houses. And if those were part of your retirement plan, if those were part of your kind of family legacy, they're now at risk to the child's liabilities. So it really is expanding your liability as well as having some poor tax choices. And that's just the first two. There's other reasons on that too, but that's one where people just have a misstep. They just assume I can just do this and it'll be no big deal. But really, in my mind, for estate planning, I see some kind of major consequences potentially for making that choice.
Yep, for sure.
All right, let's jump forward. The next one that I think is a little more planning side. So less of those first two are just kind of like knee jerk reactions. We see those all the time. The next one is a little more planning and thoughtful. Is planning for illiquid assets. When I say illiquid assets, I mean like a house, something that you can't just like turn to cash the next day. So a good
Cars,
example.
classic cars or artwork
Or a
or, right, any
business,
sort of
right?
like tangible personal property.
Yeah, a business is a great example as well because you can't just turn that into cash the next day. It might even take a year or two to get that turned over. But the reason I think about planning is to say you give your child a house. You've owned this nice beach house you've really liked over the years. You give it to them when you pass away. Well, when they inherit that, they're going to get the house, which is wonderful. They're also going to get some property taxes, some insurance costs, maybe some HOAs, maybe a gardener, those things. And if their life is structured that they can afford all that, great. They're going to really enjoy that. But we've had a number of clients. We had one specifically that it was our client who passed away, and their child inherited a Laguna Beach house. And the child thought they're going to keep it. And the whole intention was that they were going to give it to him so that they could sell it and use the money for other things. But the child wanted to keep it. But it took a while for him to realize he couldn't even afford the property taxes on that home, much less the upkeep and all the other things. And so when I think about like planning out illiquid assets, if the desire had been to keep that home as a family home, well, there needed to be some cash or something to go with it to really make that a usable asset. And so I think when people are going through their estates and trying to give gifts, it's really important to be thoughtful. If I'm giving someone a business, if I'm giving someone a classic car, if I'm giving someone a home that's not just cash, are they going to be able to manage this? Do I need to couple that with some sort of a cash gift? I think naturally people think about this when they're talking about their pets. We had a client that had some horses and said, hey, if I'm going to give my horse to somebody, I can't just give them the horse because horses eat, they need care. Also, so they naturally thought, oh, if I'm going to give them the horse, I'm also going to give them a little bit of money so they can easily care for that animal. And I think people need to think about that same idea when they're giving any sort of asset. If they're giving a house or a classic car, do I need to also give them some sort of cash that will allow them to really enjoy and utilize that asset?
Yeah, there's so many factors to think. Going back to the Laguna Beach property, if it's not a residence and if the person inherits it, then there's going to be a step up on the assessed valuation. So all of a sudden, in Prop 13, that the parents were paying a very reasonable or lower property tax. Well, you take a Laguna Beach property, like you said, the property taxes become immense because it steps up to current market value, and the inheritor, the person who received that as part of the estate, trying to retain that property, it takes a lot just to maintain it, just the property tax alone, much less HOAs and everything else.
Yeah.
So again, you better look before you leap because
And
it'll
I
be
think
embarrassing.
what occurs to me too is the need to just have some conversation about your estate plan before you pass away. We oftentimes host family meetings where we bring in the next generation, those who are set to inherit assets from their parents, and have conversation. And if that's something to have a third party and help facilitate that, that's a role that we love to play. Some families have those conversations just as a one-off so that you understand their intention as it relates to that asset. Like if I'm going to inherit horses, if I'm going to inherit a Laguna Beach house, oh, that's been a part of our dream. We'd love to utilize that as an investment property. Or we really just need the money from that. Like we're going to liquidate it, right? So there's conversations that can be had
For sure.
before the estate plan is actually activated that help just create kind of a smoothness in that transition of asset after life.
Yep, that's great. Yeah, I love it. It's interesting how much of this stuff that becomes common sense, when you're in this industry, but how much of these missteps, what people hear, what people think, what they've heard on the street, it's really incredible how much misinformation is out there of what people have either talked to friends or seen online, and they come to our office, talking about a larger financial plan. But as we start doing their estate planning, those discussions, there's a lot that gets unearthed, like you said, Laura, of wanting some expectations. And even between, a married couple or partners, we've seen a number of times where they have different desires, different expectations. We've had some where they'll say, oh yeah, our kids are going to keep that house forever. They're going to live there. The other one looks at them and says, they're never going to live there. Like they're going to sell it. Like they don't want to live in that house. And,
Right.
and really helping solidify what the family wants to happen with those assets, and then how to best utilize them for the next generation. So that's good. The next one that we see a lot, and this is one that I think even attorneys don't do a great job of really dealing with it when they first meet with them. So us working between finance and legal together, we're kind of in this spot that it's not coordinating the estate plan with other assets. I've gone through times where the client working really hard to protect their children from themselves, to say, hey, this is a large estate. If I were to pass away and my kids just receive this money, man, that's not going to be the best for them. We need to put some safeguards in place. And they do that. We put in some age limitations. We name the right trustees who are really going to help them really just grow into the best version of themselves. We do all this work. And we realize there's, a couple houses, maybe real estate in the trust. But then, and that they're happy with it. They're ready to sign everything. They're ready to be done. But then we look over to their K or their IRA, some of these other assets that don't flow through the trust. They transfer what's called beneficiary designation. And they might have named their children directly to receive this money. They said, well, first my spouse can have my 401k. And after my spouse, it's just going to go directly to my kids. Great, they can have it. And in their mind, even though they're separate assets, they're considering it's all going to flow and do what the trust said, because I just made a trust. But really, there needs to be some extra planning to either make everything go into the trust or know that structure, if you have it set up like that and you pass away, even though these assets that are in the trust are really protected from the kids, the other set of assets are going to go directly to them. And if you have a large 401k and the child, walks into $500,000 or something, that may be very contrary to what you wanted.
Right.
So that's a big piece there of making sure that it's coordinated.
And there were some law changes regarding retirement accounts here recently. And so there was kind of I don't know, call it a reprieve or whatever. So non-spouse beneficiaries could structure that to be paid out over their lifetime. But the law changes and said restricted it now. So if you're a non-spouse beneficiary, you have 10 years to take the distribution. And of course, we always make sure that the client is aware, as well as the beneficiary, that money that's coming out is fully taxable.
I was going to
And it's
say, drum
amazing to
roll,
me.
please.
Yeah.
Don't get to avoid those taxes.
What most people, again, we're in the business. I mean, this is something that we dive into every day, but a lot of people are unaware. Says, well, that should be coming out tax free, right? I went, no, it's all come and they say, well, how much tax do I pay? I said, what is your tax bracket? So we take them through the process, and a lot of people are going, oh, that's a lot of taxes coming out. So how you structure that payout and what we do with not only the client, but also the beneficiaries, oftentimes they become our client too, is just to structure that. So it's the most, again, like going back to what you're saying, Jeremiah, make sure that they understand what their options are. And, a lot of people just red light, red light, red light, here's a stop, evaluate. Like I said, there should be music in your life. There should be this background music. Just be careful. Anyway.
I love that. If only. I'd love a soundtrack to my life, right?
I would love to soundtrack. I say when you're pulling up, you're dealing with somebody that's a bad guy and all this sound starts coming at you, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Anyway.
Exactly.
That's so good.
Things to avoid. But no, I mean,
Cool.
and I think an easy way, and I know I've talked about this before on our show, is that if the money has gone in pre-tax, whether it was you or whether it was the person that you're inheriting from, if the money has gone in pre-tax, then when it comes out, that's the time to pay taxes. So that's why that 10-year timestamp from the date of death is one to start to plan ahead for, especially if you're in your working years. So you might be in a higher income earning season of your life, and then you're adding on these inherited funds that you need to take. So incrementally taking them, you can kind of spread out that tax liability over the 10 years.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
All right, the last one we'll touch on is, again, it's a California specific thing. It's called community property. And so a lot of states don't have community property. There's other versions
it's not just California. There are other states, though, that have community property, right?
That's true. I think there's
Not
about
very many,
7
though.
of them.
Not very
I think
many.
there's about 7 of the 50. Most of them are Western states of people who allow this idea of community property. And in divorce, that's where most people think about this. It's community property. How are we going to split this up? The idea of community property is that everything that you earn during a union, during a marriage, is owned by both of you. And so in a divorce, that's usually where people think about how they have to split it out. But in the estate planning sense, it's really important to identify where did this property come from and how is it going to be treated. The example being, if a married couple owned a rental property in Colorado and they were out living in Colorado and one of them passes away, they're going to get a step up on 50% of the cost basis of that home. And so the survivor, if they were to sell the home, only has to pay the taxes on their half. The deceased partner, their half, all those taxes kind of disappear, which is useful for a survivor, but it's only a half step up. In California and other community property states, because of community property, when one spouse passes away, you get 100% step up. So both spouses have the cost basis move up, and so all the taxes go to zero generally. So we've had a number of widows or widowers, someone in a married couple where one spouse passes away, that they have a home or they have an investment property that they had discussed with their spouse. Oh, we'll never sell this. It's great income. We're always going to have it. We have so many built-in capital gains. And that was the operating idea. But then when one passes away, the tax structure entirely changes. And it's a really good moment to reconsider whether those real estate holdings are appropriate, even whether that stock portfolio is appropriate. So in the planning, we've had a number of folks, as we talk through what this looks like, being a community property state, that they've actually changed their estate plan to say, actually, we're going to hold all these things until one of us passes away, whatever time that is. And when one of us passes away, the survivor, and what we kind of put in the trust, the survivor is going to go through and start liquidating a lot of this stuff because they can take these great assets that we've had over the years, turn them into cash, which is usable, it's investable, and it's much easier for the next generation to receive. So we have a few clients that because of this, at the first death, there's actually some planned out marching orders to start kind of tidying up their own estate, knowing that all those taxes just disappeared because of the community property. And in other states, like Colorado or places that it's just a different analysis and it's a different structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so important to bring this up because what you provide to the analysis is not only California, but you also have a breadth of knowledge in areas where you don't necessarily know all the intricacies of a particular state. You can reach out and get that information. You're able to interpret that and bring that back as vital information to the client so they don't make a decision that's going to really harm them later down. And it's not necessarily the client, but it's the beneficiaries, the children, grandchildren, such as that. And some lives, when we sit down and talk and we start to peel back the onion, peel it off, their lives are complex. They think, well, I don't really have that much, but they've inherited property from their parents. Maybe that property's in another state. It's got a rental or it's a vacation home. And who does the repairs, the maintenance on it? And all this stuff kind of works all together. And it's like, okay, it's more complex than you think. You think your life's simple, but it's not necessarily simple.
Yeah.
So having
And
good
let's tease
advice
that
is
out
really
just
important.
for a minute, just as this is kind of like a little dotted line, but you talked about community property and those assets that are acquired while you're married. But let's say while you're married, you receive an inheritance, right? That
Good
can be
point.
considered separate property unless you put it jointly titled or in the name of your trust. Then that asset then turns into, correct me if I'm wrong, attorney, a jointly held asset. But there are things that you can acquire while in marriage that are still considered separate property. But for the most part, if you bought a home together, you opened a checking account together, income earned as a married couple, that's all considered community property.
Yep, you're right on. And for a lot of folks, especially if they've moved, they used to live in one state and they had some property and then they moved to another state and they sold that property and bought a new property. Well, how does that work out, right? It becomes a little complicated, as you said, Randy. But with that, I think in the midst of the complication, people, as they start to go down this road of seeing it complicated, then they start feeling disempowered. What am I going to do? This is too complex. And that's where I think, one, revealing these missteps, hey, things you didn't know you should deal with, and then being able to provide also the solution to say, we can tune this up. We can get this structure. We can get this set up. Because none of this stuff is so complex on the front end that it's scary. This is complex on the back end. If someone passes away and now we've got to fix it, we've got to walk through probate, it takes time. It's more difficult. But on the front end, when they're still living and there's opportunity to structure things, to adjust things, man, there's a lot that can be done, in my mind, pretty easily to get this tuned up so that the first job of these assets are to care for the client, care for you for your life, make sure you have access to everything you need. But then second, as it transitions to the next generation or to your spouse, that it's the most tax and administratively easy process you can have. And it's, like I said, it's not that hard. We do trusts every week here. And to get those things tuned up for people, they really make a big difference as they go forward.
Yep. All right. Well, there are more missteps when it comes to estate planning, but I think we've covered off a few of the big ones. So we hope this was helpful to our listeners. And hey, if you have questions, if you don't have an estate plan, if you're wondering if you need one, or if your estate plan needs a tune-up, or if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call. We would love to help you here at Tricord.
Remember, Tricord Advisors is your money's best ally. Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.